Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. We're on the subject of grants today, and I appreciate your bringing up some of the bipartisan grants that I've been working on. We've also had a termination of a whole bevy of grants that come out of the Department of Justice. And I just want to flag some of the areas in which grants were terminated in areas where this committee has done really good work. Grants were terminated for Project Safe Neighborhoods. Over and over again, this committee has applauded Project Safe Neighborhoods. It's been 25 years, I want to say now, in the Department of Justice. Rhode Island, when I was U.S. Attorney, was one of the first states to start what is now called the Project Safe Neighborhoods program. If you're a violent gangster and you use a gun in a crime, one simple thing was you're going federal. And that was replicated around the country. I think Project Safe Neighborhoods is a very good program with longstanding bipartisan support. Don't know why it was cut. You and I, Mr. Chairman, have done the reauthorization of the Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention Act. Funding for assisting states in complying with that was also cut. I think we all agree that the JJDPA, as we reauthorized it, is a good thing. It had no problem passing as a reauthorization. CARA, Comprehensive Addiction Recovery Act, was the biggest piece of opioid legislation we've ever passed. I worked on that with Republican co-sponsors to get that passed. It's been repeatedly funded. And I just don't know why something as bipartisan as funding for CARA designated programs would be cut. The Second Chance Act was also cut, which helps with people coming out of prison and going into reentry at the state level. This worked so well in Rhode Island and in other states that Senator Cornyn and I did a federal version of it, which passed without much contest. Everybody supported it for federal prisons as well. And it's been very, very successful. The most useful thing probably is helping people coming out of prison with addiction issues to get medication-assisted treatment started before they're discharged so that when they're out on the street, they're already on the program. That saved lives. It reduced reoffending. So over and over again, whether it's Project Safe Neighborhoods, JJDPA, CARA, or Second Chance, here are programs that this committee on a bipartisan basis has strongly and continually supported, and yet they're cut. So I'd like to try to get more of an explanation of that from the department. And then going forward, grants like the ones we're going to be discussing today are going to be subjected to a screen that obliges the department to look at whether there are sanctuary cities in the jurisdiction. I don't know what that actually means. It's not a legal term of art. We have a federal court and a circuit court of appeals, the First Circuit, that have determined that you need a warrant for local law enforcement to make immigration arrests. This is law enforcement. They can't go into court and say, I'm not going to obey court orders, and they shouldn't be tasked or punished with not getting grants because they are obeying court orders. This is law enforcement, for Pete's sake. School COVID vax requirements. I don't know what that has to do with anything. In Rhode Island, the municipality doesn't directly control the school. There's a separate school committee that does. So it makes it very hard to hold a police chief accountable for what a separate school committee does. There are concerns about gender ideology, so-called, their phrase, that would render an organization unsuitable for grants. I don't know what that means. Does that mean that recruiting female officers is a statement of gender ideology that would be punished? It doesn't make any sense, but who knows? We need clarity on that. No mentions of DEI or EJ. I had the unhappy circumstance of being the Attorney General when a white police officer in uniform shot and killed a black police officer out of uniform, not knowing that he was a fellow officer. It was a blue-on-blue shooting. It inflamed, for good reasons, the black community that this had happened. The man who was killed, his father was a very senior officer in the police department, and the U.S. DOJ Community Relations Service came in to help deal with the community issues that had arisen and lower the temperature, and they were very effective. I thought we've supported the DOJ Community Relations Service always. Is bringing in CRS a DEI or, environmental justice concern? We need to know. If you've had a vandalized monument, it looks like that disqualifies you. I think there are a great number of jurisdictions that have had vandalized monuments. And I don't know that that's a legitimate test for whether somebody should get, for instance, a CARA grant to deal with opioid offenses. And finally, full compliance with all executive orders seems to be required, even where those executive orders have been thrown out of court as unconstitutional. Again, these are law enforcement agencies. You can't ask them to comply with an order that their courts have already determined to be unconstitutional, and they shouldn't be punished in terms of being unable to get Project Safe Neighborhoods, JDPA, CARA, or Second Chance grants because of that. My point here is that this is a huge mess and muddle right now, and it would be very helpful, particularly as the chair of the court subcommittee, to figure out a way to get some clarity about what DOJ really means and what people applying for the grants that we're going to approve today will need to disclose and how they need to prepare for that to make sure that these grant programs are administered fairly and with common sense.